Welcome to One Continent, where we go beyond the headlines to explore how Africa fits into the global picture. Our team of experts brings insights into both global affairs and Africa's unique perspective. We are here to help you better understand Africa and its place in the world. By showcasing diverse voices and rich cultures, we cover the week's most important stories and their impact on Africa and its youth. Think of us as a bridge between the rest of the world and Africa, connecting you to what really matters the most. One Continent begins right now. I'm Calebkoyo. It's vote o'clock again for the USA as they go to the polls on the 5th of November 2024 to elect the country's next president. The run-up to the US elections is always a dramatic campaign that is very interesting to watch. This year, the presidential ballot pits incumbent president and Democrat candidate Joe Biden against the Republican speaker Donald Trump. While the voting may be confined to American soil, the outcome of the elections has far-reaching implications for Africa and the rest of the world, actually. Now, the USA has no fixed foreign policy towards Africa, and thus foreign policy is very much dependent on the inhabitant of the White House. How the US provides aid and trades with Africa has changed significantly with the government of the day. So what exactly does the US have to do with Africa as far as their elections is concerned? Take a look.
The U.S. elections wield a profound influence on Africa, given the United States' stature as a global superpower. For answers, let's look into how various U.S. administrations have steered their Africa policies and significance of the 2024 elections for the continent. During the Bush administration between 2001 and 2009, President George W. Bush oversaw substantial enhancements in aid to Africa facilitated by the USAID. The president's emergency plans for AIDS relief accelerated efforts to combat HIV and AIDS. Trade initiatives receive a boost with the reinforcement of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Under the Obama administration between 2009 and 2017, President Barack Obama pivoted towards prioritizing trade over aid. Multiple African business initiatives were launched to bolster capacity on the continent. Leadership programs targeting the development of young African leaders were also rolled out. In the Trump administration between 2017 and 2021, immigration regulations were tightened and proposals to slash aid to Africa were tabled. Controversial remarks, including derogatory references to African nations, sparked apprehension. In his first term in office, current President Joe Biden accelerated high-level exchanges, directing an unprecedented pace of visits to the continent, notably the $8 billion investment in public and private sector, not to mention investment in climate and food security, women's empowerment, and digital inclusion across Africa. In essence, the outcome of the U.S. elections mold foreign policy towards Africa, influencing aid, trade, and diplomatic engagements. As Africa assumes increasing global significance, comprehending these implications proves vital for both the continent and the international community.
Now, climate change makes existing inequalities even worse. When extreme weather hits, women and girls suffer even more. The UN found out that violence at home increases, girls drop out of school, young girls get married off early, and displaced women and girls are more likely to face sexual exploitation and trafficking, to mention only but a few challenges. Now, this week, One Continent filed a very special report looking at a few countries and how climate change affects the girls. UNICEF reports that 10 million children aged between 5 and 14 are not attending school in Nigeria. For girls, the situation is very serious, with less than half attending school in certain states in northeast and northwest of some regions in Nigeria. This educational crisis stems from a complex web of factors, including poverty, geographical challenges, and gender bias. This is actually according to a report by the UN. However, underlying these individual issues is the overreaching influence of the climate crisis going on in Africa right now. Nigeria is experiencing increasing heat and aridity, accompanied by more frequent and extreme weather events such as flash floods and landslides. These climate-related disasters often render schools inaccessible and classrooms very unsafe. Struggling communities in Nigeria may rely on children to assist or generate additional income for their families, further impeding their access to education. Girls who already face discouragement from attending schools in some communities in Nigeria are placed in very difficult situations and actually affected by such circumstances. Moving to Brazil, the Amazon rainforests play a very crucial role as a carbon sink, absorbing more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than it actually emits. However, the combined pressures of the climate crisis and the extensive deforestation for agricultural and ranching purposes are exerting a heavy toll, endangering the Amazon's resilience and the potential to recover. In northeastern Brazil, for example, a collective of women in the Amazon basin is challenging the dominance of large corporations over the forest. CNN actually interviewed nearly 60 women from this region who rely on harvesting coconuts from native babasu palm trees for their livelihoods. They express growing concern as major agricultural companies continue to clear the forest and limit women's access to these trees. For these women, the struggle extends beyond ensuring their own food security. It's also about advocating for gender and equity. They see their efforts as means to promote sustainable agriculture and enhance the protection of this vital forest, of course, being thrown away each and every time. In Philippines, one of the ways climate crisis can worsen gender inequality is by increasing the risk of sexual abuse and human trafficking. According to a 2022 report from the UN Office on Drug and Crime, the climate crisis doesn't just wreck jobs, but also, of course, it pushes people into poverty and make them leave home all at the same time. It also makes women and girls more likely to be sexually exploited. Abusers and traffickers target these vulnerable women and girls in new towns or crowded shelters where they don't know anyone, and make them, suffer so much. Now we move to Pakistan, where pregnant women actually face a very particular risk from climate change, especially extreme heat. Studies have now found a connection between various heat waves and, of course, maternal health issues as well, like premature births, stillbirths, and low birth weight. Research published in the British Medical Journal in 2020 revealed that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, there's about 5% rise in stillbirths and premature deliveries, based on analysis that was done on 70 studies. Pregnant women in Pakistan experience health problems such as fainting, sickness, loss of appetite, and dehydration during this period, as reported by the Maternal Health non-profit White Ribbon Alliance this year. Despite these challenges, many had to continue working outdoors without relief from the scorching temperatures, further straining their bodies. Finally, in Kenya, the nation has shifted from a devastating multi-year drought to deadly flooding, with 70% of people relying on farming as their main source of income. According to World Bank, this swing between extremes spells crisis. The severe weather has led to acute food shortages and displacement. Studies have shown that it has also heightened the risk of gender-based violence. While the causes of gender-based violence against women and girls are very complex here in Kenya, experts now agree that climate change worsens this risk. However, efforts are actually underway to break this cycle, with organizations like Coalition on Violence Against Women, a non-profit organization based in Kenya, advocating for women's and girls' rights and providing services to protect all of them from any form of violence. There is hope. President Vladimir Putin began his 5th term at a glittering inauguration, embarking on another 6 years as leader of Russia after destroying his political opponents, launching a devastating war in Ukraine, and concentrating all power in his hands. At the inauguration ceremony, Putin placed his hand on the Russian constitution and vowed to defend it as a crowd of hand-picked dignitaries looked on. Since succeeding former President Boris Yeltsin in 1999, Putin has transformed Russia from a country emerging from economic collapse to a state that threatens global security. But how exactly does his 5th term as president affect Africa? Take a look. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been actively pursuing deeper engagement with African countries, aiming to boost relationships and foster collaboration. Here are key insights into Putin's presidency and its impact on Africa. We start by looking at how Putin has done as far as aid and assistance is concerned. Putin has shown a keen interest in advancing ties to the African nation, with a focus on providing aid to boost national healthcare systems, upgrade technical infrastructure, and enhance epidemic resilience. Russia has committed a substantial assistance program, allocating around $13 million through to 2026 to combat infections in Africa. Furthermore, Russia continues to supply grain to African nations, both through commercial transactions and as part of humanitarian aid efforts. But Let's look at this story in the right context and the challenges that it might bring to Africa. Putin's initiative to engage with Africa occur against the backdrop of Russia's international isolation stemming from its action in Ukraine. The Kremlin's involvement in the Ukrainian conflict has resulted in sanctioned and strained relations with numerous foreign governments. Despite these challenges, Putin's overturns to African nations have faced varied responses. While some countries have abstained from attending Putin's summits, others have actually maintained neutrality or lauded Russia as a dependable food supplier despite geopolitical tensions going on in the world and in Africa. Now, let's look at the growing role of Putin in Africa. Putin actually acknowledges Africa's rising influence in global affairs and has actively courted African leaders, underscoring the continent's significance. The inaugural Russia-Africa summit held in 2019 highlighted the potential for mutual beneficial partnership and opportunities across various sectors. Putin's presidency is marked by a concerted effort to strengthen ties with African nations, notwithstanding geopolitical hurdles. African nations must navigate cautiously to safeguard their interest and maintain balanced relationship with Russia and other global stakeholders. Some quarters are growing increasingly alarmed about TikTok, with Western governments initiating actions specifically regarding data security. However, there has been minimal official commentary from African authorities thus far. The app's captivating format has captivated the globe, and Africa is no exception. Its endless scrolling, bite-sized informational bursts, and seemingly intuitive algorithm entices users, leading to time slipping away unnoticed. This can result into something that is called TikTok-induced headache, where comprehension relies heavily on meme presentation. Resisting this persuasive influence may prove fatal, warranting our continent's attention. The influence of TikTok on African youth has become a subject of increasing discussion. Today on One Continent, we put this story into its very right perspective, and we do this by starting to look at TikTok's surge in Africa. As per the 2022 Reuters Institute Digital News report, Africa has emerged as a pivotal market for TikTok, witnessing a surge in young users. Of course, they are leveraging the platform to assess current affairs and to entertain themselves all at the same time. TikTok, under the ownership of Chinese company ByteDance, has provided African creators with a platform to express themselves, challenging prevailing narratives about the continent and offering alternative viewpoints. Notably, Tanzanian creators like Kili and Neema Paul have garnered significant followings, even in places like India, underscoring TikTok's global impact. So TikTok is here. Another angle to this TikTok story is data security apprehensions. While Western governments have actually taken decisive actions against TikTok due to fear regarding data security, African governments have maintained a very silent stance on this issue, refraining from implementing any measures against the platform. Kenyan journalist Kennedy Kachwanya actually talked about this issue, and he underscored the importance of considering past incidences such as Cambridge Analytica's exploitation of user data in Kenya for electoral manipulation, emphasizing the need for vigilance despite the absence of official scrutiny from the Kenyan government and generally African government. But also another angle is economic dynamics. For young Africans, TikTok not only offers entertainment but serves as a means of livelihood, specifically in regions grappling with limited employment opportunities. Banning TikTok could profoundly impact these creators, jeopardizing their income streams and diminishing their visibility in the digital landscape. But also, we have to talk about the mental health implications of TikTok. The addictive nature of TikTok's format, characterized by instant scrolling and rapid-fire content consumption, poses challenges to productivity and mental well-being. While some experts suggest that a ban on TikTok could potentially benefit individuals grappling with addiction to the platform, parents also perceive this as a measure that can enhance children's safety. And we have some regions in the US where they have actually limited TikTok to, kids cannot access it at all. Now, while TikTok has empowered African youth by providing them with a platform for self-expression and economic opportunities, concerns regarding data security, productivity, mental health necessitate careful consideration. Striking a balance between platforms' advantages and potential risk poses a very significant challenge for policymakers and users alike. Amid the tragic loss of life, African policymakers and investors are confronting the economic and political ramifications of the Israel-Hamas conflict on their domestic economies. This fallout could profoundly disrupt economies still grappling with the aftermath of COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Such disruptions might lead to fractures in the delicate geopolitical landscape, giving rise to new security challenges. Many African nations lack substantial reserves to caution against further external shocks and will then need to manage any contagion carefully. So what does the Israel-Hamas conflict mean for Africa and the youth? African nations will actually see distinct outcomes, with some emerging as winners and others as losers. Countries like South Africa, Ghana, and Tanzania, which are major gold producers, stand to gain from the significant price increases, which will actually boost their foreign exchange earnings. Consequently, economies in Africa heavily reliant on oil products such as Kenya and Mozambique will actually face adverse effects from high oil prices. Many of these nations are already grappling with challenges in meeting their external obligations due to currency devaluations and dwindling foreign exchange reserves. The additional strain of upcoming bond redemptions and continent-wide election next year will actually compound these concerns, contributing to a growing list of worries for countries in the African region. In general, the conflict worsens the already complex task of addressing Africa's multifaceted crisis. Considering the relationships among economic, political, and security factors, African nations find themselves unable to benefit from the current circumstances, that is the war. However, they can mitigate potential losses by enhancing their readiness to handle fiscal, monetary, and balance of payments challenges while avoiding actions that might harm their geopolitical standing. This underscores the need for careful economic management and strategic political maneuvering for African countries as far as the war between Hamas and Israel is actually concerned. From that report, we come to the end of the broadcast here at the Koyo Center, Egerton University, Kenya. Thank you so much for watching. But before I go, I just want to remind you, if you're looking for inspiration, just remember, Harambee Starlets under-17 team has qualified for the World Cup for the very first time. Nobody ever thought the under-17 female team would be the first team from Kenya to qualify for a FIFA Women's World Cup. Now, those 17-year-old kids are inspiring the senior men national team and the senior female national team. Only one thing we can say about that: if you're good enough, you're old enough. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, I'm Calebkoyo. Thank you.